Hello everyone, welcome to a new video. So today I wanted to talk about the 9 books I read in January because I'm finally out of my reading slump and I'm reading again. Not that I wasn't reading, but yeah, in November I read like 2 books, December 1 book. I was in a big reading slump. Finally in January I overcame it and I read 9 books, so let's talk about them. Scooting over here so you guys can see the books. The first book I want to talk about is the first book I read which is Blood Over Bright Haven by Emma Wong. This I ended up rating a 4.6 stars. Yes, I am now dabbling into the decimal points. I'm now rating on a like 0.10 scale, I guess. I really enjoyed this book. I definitely enjoyed the themes of sexism and misogyny, the themes of racism, xenophobia, extremism of religion, classism, capitalism, all of these themes. I definitely think they were well incorporated. Yes, at some points they were kind of thrown in your face, but I think with the way the story progressed, they were incorporated very well into their specific section. So the story is basically about this girl, Shiona, who takes a test at the beginning of the book to become a high mage. And in her society, the high mages and everyone who's kind of powerful in terms of magic and determines how magic is dealt with in the world, they're all males. And so she is the first female to be a high mage, and she's really dealing with a lot of sexism from her coworkers and from her higher ups, her bosses, and even just from like regular street people. So yeah, she's experiencing a lot of that. And one of the, I guess, consequences of this like a little sexism thing that goes on is that she gets stuck with this assistant who's a Quen, who is essentially a minority group, who is like the working class basically. In this world, the Quen are basically what keeps the city running, but they have very little rights, they're oppressed, you know, all these things. Her coworkers kind of are like, yeah, like you're not gonna go anywhere with a Quen as an assistant, also since he's never studied magic or anything. They end up turning things around, and Thamel, her assistant, they kind of end up forming a friendship of sorts. I think Shiona, like most of the book, I didn't really like her because she was very ignorant. Like she was very intelligent and a genius basically, but she was incredibly ignorant and kind of blinded by religion, and I really dislike characters that are blinded by religion, so I kind of struggled with her. But she does have her character growth. She learns immensely, and she's kind of like, she kicks herself out of denial. Like she actually opens her eyes to the reality of the world, and something happens. She finds something out, I guess a plot where the plot turns, but I definitely anticipated it. Like I don't think it was a betrayal or a plot twist, because it's hinted at like while it's happening. But yeah, Shiona, I don't want to say too much, but she does towards the later half of the book embody female rage. She becomes, well, she's always been kind of morally gray. She's always been someone who's like, I'm just here for my success and that's it. So she is pretty morally gray, but she becomes even more morally gray. And I think she's actually a very good example of morally gray, because she does certain things that, you know, I don't know if you can excuse it, if you can't, you know, but she does it to a group of people that kind of deserve it, you know? It's not like she goes and annihilates an entire group of people that are innocent basically. So, you know, she's like a good example of, yeah, she probably shouldn't have done that, but like at the same time, like you fully understand and you almost kind of get it, you know? And so I think she's even more of a embodiment of female rage and like girl boss than Rin from the Poppy War, which a lot of people always are like, yeah, Rin is the ultimate girl boss. I definitely do not see her character as that. That's a completely different discussion. But I think Shiona from this book is definitely more like Rin, but tamed and actually a girl boss, you know? I think there was fantastic writing, fantastic world building, and the only thing though that made me dock off points, one is just like 5-star for me is a feeling, and I didn't really get that feeling. At the beginning, I was really into the book, but I do think it lost its steam, and I got a little bit bored towards the, like, I guess 20 to 40% of the book. But the main thing is that basically, and it's no secret, but Shiona and Thamel kind of develop a romantic relationship of sorts which I wish they had not. I won't say that she's an oppressor and he's the oppressed, but in their society, they are. And there's incredible power imbalance in the relationship. And I think it progressed too quickly. Like, I understood Thamo had that attraction and so did she, but like, I didn't like that it was kind of muddy, I guess, like the way that she's like going through her character growth. She's discovering new things. She's discovering that people have lied to her and all of that. And it has to deal with Thamo's people. And so it's kind of sometimes feels like, you know, oh, is she only really doing this for Thamo? Like, because she loves him instead of like the goodness of her heart and because her character is actually growing as a person. So like sometimes it gets muddy a little bit like that. And I just wish they had just stayed being friends and the friendship had just like been their relationship dynamic. Because yeah, I don't like the power imbalance. I don't like this kind of like, yeah, I don't know. They started off with her being so ignorant and racist. And it's like, I don't know how you can fall in love with someone who is so racist towards you. But in the second book I read, which I actually reread Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin, I am on the hunt to acquire all of James Baldwin's books. I want all of his Penguin modern classics though, and they're a little bit expensive, and most of them come from like England. I think if I want his entire collection. Anyways, really random. But I reread this, and this time I did tab them with the very beautiful tabs, purple and blue. Look at the highlighting I did. This green is the exact green as this. It like genuinely brought me so much joy to do it. I was so precise. I had like a ruler. And yeah, I've talked about this book before on my channel. This is probably my favorite book of all time. I think it's absolutely fantastic. There's incredible themes of homosexuality, of homophobia. Since it is set in 1950, there's a lot of interest. As a wannabe historian, there's a lot of interesting observations I can make about Parisian society then, how it relates to Parisian society now. So basically the main character, David, is a young American who moves to Paris in the 1950s, and he starts this romantic entanglement with Giovanni, an Italian who has moved to Paris after something horrible happened to him. They're in like this hidden relationship, and David especially is really grappling with internalized homophobia, and he is basically a guy on the down low. Like, he will absolutely not accept this part of himself, and even towards the end he does have a certain character growth, but at the same time, like, it's not as much as you the reader would have liked to see him grow. Basically character study, but also in a way like society and city study. Like, you definitely do study the differences in their cultures. Like, David and Giovanni had totally different cultures. David is a prime example of an American, and for me specifically, it was very interesting to read and to reanalyze because I'm an American who is half French. So I grew up speaking French. I grew up with my mother who is French. Like, I'm very affected by French culture, you know, but I do, obviously, since I was born and raised in the United States and in New York specifically. David was also raised in New York. We have these certain, you know, just like American ways of thinking. The ways to go about the world are very American, and I definitely related to his American side of it. And then thrown into Paris, I was definitely like, wow, this is also how I feel in Paris. And it's interesting how the characters kind of react to him, because that's how even me, like 70 years later in 2020, that's how like Parisian act towards me. So it's like 70 years later, there's still that like push and pull when it comes to American and French relationships. And that like, and it's so interesting how these like cultural beliefs are still here. Like, it's 70 years later, and I noticed the same thing as what's going on in the book in real life. So it's very interesting, especially if you've ever struggled with your sexuality and everything. I think this is an incredible book to kind of see the consequences of denying who you are. It's a depressing book. I will not tell you the ending, obviously, but it is not happily ever after. It's not supposed to be either, because that would kind of defeat the whole purpose of the lessons of this book, but it's just absolutely phenomenal. The writing is phenomenal. It keeps you captivated. I cried. I laughed. I was like, yeah, that's really real. So I just love this book. It's also really short, so you can read it really quickly. I read it in a couple days. I actually initially read it to write an essay for a school I was gonna apply to, but I ended up not applying to the school. I did finish the book though, because it was so good. Also, this is a classic queer lit book, so if you are looking to expand your queer lit, add this one to the list. And the last thing I want to say is that all the characters in here are flawed. For example, a lot of the things I realized was that Giovanni especially he was a lot more accepting of his homosexuality, you know, but at the same time he had this very innate misogynistic way about him, and I did really like Giovanni, and if he hadn't been a misogynist I would have definitely like loved him. But all the characters in this book are flawed. It's why the book ended the way it did. And the thing specifically with Giovanni being misogynistic, and it's very interesting to me because I have encountered certain gay men that I absolutely adore, but some of them have also been misogynistic, and especially online you see a lot more of that kind of dynamic of, I wouldn't say both straight girls and gay guys fight over guys, because that's kind of like I don't know, kind of like an extreme thought. Like, that's not really how it works. But I will say there's these misogynistic tones that definitely are from Giovanni, that are definitely jealousy, and just jealous of the fact that women are able to just outwardly love men. And Giovanni definitely wants that for himself, but he simply can't because of the society they're in. Like, gay men, you can't be openly gay, you know? And so there's definitely his misogyny. Like, yes, as a woman it hurts to hear it, and it hurts to basically have him reduced to girls as like they can't do shit and all that, but at the same time, like, understanding it through the lens of a closeted gay man, and a gay man that like doesn't want to be closeted but he's forced to be, is very interesting. And I like to explore all different types of like social inequity and just like social themes through different lenses, because you start understanding people and history so much more. So yeah, okay, I've yapped about this book way too much. Go read it. Next book I read was the second book in the Foxhole Court series, which is The Raven King. This is a great second book. I ended up rating this a 4-star. I think the plot is really weird, and this book kind of like continued the weird plot, and I do like the series in total, and I made an entire video of me reading the series, so I probably go in a lot more depth in that video if you want to watch that. I think the writing was okay, not superb, but like I obviously pushed through. One thing about me is if I don't like the writing, I will DNF the book, plain and simple. If I cannot stand the writing, I think it's so bad that it like ruins the story for me, I will not finish that book. Oh my god. Obviously it was not that horrible, otherwise I would just like not have finished the book. I think the best part of the book and the entire series, both this one and the third one, which I did also read, I'll talk about that a little later, the best thing about these books is definitely just the found family. Like, these characters are all very flawed characters. They've all had really tumultuous childhoods, you know. They have sucky parents or sucky circumstances or like big traumas, you know, and they all end up together in a XC team in college, an XC, like a sports team in college. And Neil, the main character, he specifically has a certain traumatic past, and he's running from it because he doesn't want that past to catch up to him. There's other characters. For example, Neil has a certain love interest in this book, not necessarily this one, in the third one more, but they do kind of hint at it in this one. So we see more about each character's backstory, and this book, like, I made a little summary in the other video about it, but it's basically like mafia meets college lacrosse. It's definitely an odd plot, but I think that's what makes it so fun and bingeable. But at the same time, there are certain things that can be triggering, so I would check trigger warnings. But yeah, in general, I think I enjoyed this series because I enjoyed the characters and I enjoyed studying them. But I think, yes, the plot is interesting, but I don't think it was, like, with time, it's been maybe like 2 weeks since I finished the series, and I'm not as obsessed with it. I don't think about it every day like a lot of people online talk about the series. I definitely don't think it like it spoke to me, but not to an extent where I'm like obsessed with it and I can't stop thinking about it. Like, it's fine. It's a good series. I would recommend if you want like a fun, addictive time. It kind of reads like an AO3, like I would say it reads like a 70,000 AO3 fic that you stay up late to read at like 2 and 3 a.m. Then for my audiobook of the month, I've been trying to read at least one audiobook a month just because, I don't know, one, I struggle with auditory learning. I struggle with encoding information that is presented to me through audio. And so I actually am trying to like fix that. I'm trying to get the skill of being able to understand things as well as if I was just like reading them. So that's the main thing about audiobooks. And also because they're easy. Like you can listen to them when you're doing something else. You don't have to actually like, sit down and physically read. So anyways, I read Crossroads, which I ended up rating a 3.5. This is a second chance romance. It's really cute. I definitely recommend the audio. All the audiobooks I've read before this one, I actually ended up not liking the story. I don't know if it was because it was audiobooks or if it was because of the stories, but this book I actually did enjoy, and I did enjoy it in audio as well. It took me a couple hours, like 4 hours. I do recommend it. It's on Kindle Unlimited if you have that. This is a second chance romance. A lot of miscommunication and kind of like right person, wrong time. And then just like a lot of miscommunication. This happens, but this happened, and then like that caused this not to happen. All of that jazz. And there's like past and present timelines. So we see her when she's really young, and we see India when she's very young, and she first meets this guy named West at this Montana Montana ranch, and they go there every summer, and West's family owns the ranch, and so they kind of just hang out a bunch. And as the years go by, they only see each other the summer, so they only see each other like 1 or 2 weeks of the summer. So obviously they don't really have like a real relationship because it's like a week a year, but you know, they start having like feelings as they grow older. And then as they get older, the ranch is basically going through financial ruin, and so India, who has money, basically buys it from West's dad, and some problems come with that, but in the end, it's a cute romance. I think they do have chemistry. I liked it. I read a couple reviews about this where people were they thought that they were like so toxic, that this was toxic romance. Here's the thing, I can recognize when something is toxic, when a relationship is toxic. I don't think they were toxic. I think they were pretty cute. Like, yeah, okay, there was the theme of like them still loving each other when they were in relationships with other people, which you could say that's toxic, but like, to be fair, I think that's just really realistic. Third book, The King's Men, which I ended up rating a 4.25. Once again, I think this was I think this was definitely the best book of the series. I think she closes out the series well. There is a great progression between Neil and his love interest, which I think they're so freaking cute. That's definitely my favorite part of the entire series. Neil and his love interest have the cutest relationship ever. I kind of just want like a novella about them because they're really cute. And we see more growth from all the characters, so even more of like a found family impact. And since you followed these characters for at least 2 books before, it hits even more to see them genuinely grow and get rid of their destructive mentalities and their destructive actions, and just generally become better people and more calm people. Like they've, sorted through their demons. And it's actually, it's like you feel like genuinely your friends are like getting better. So I did really like this book. And then I reread a series I absolutely adored in middle school. I just was going through a nostalgic time, and so I reread the Selection series, starting with the first book, The Selection, which I rated a 3. I think it was a solid start. Not much happens, I guess. There's America they live in a dystopian American society, which is like, there's a whole lore, but basically there's like a civil war, and then China acquires America, and then America basically ends up creating its own country after getting rid of Russian and Chinese forces. I think actually Russia in this world, like Russia and Canada met up or something, like I don't know. It's kind of crazy in the way that like there's kind of the stereotypical like, oh, China came and attacked us, so we became like the United States of China. I think that's quite literally what they were called. So they become the United States of China, which is kind of like stereotypical, but then as the story progresses, you actually like some of the dystopian elements are freakishly similar to what's going on now. So I think it was a solid introduction. It has pretty good writing. I definitely don't think it's the best writing for young adult. I still can't figure out where I would position this because I read this in middle school. I read this when I was like 12. So honestly, 12 is kind of like juvenile. Like it's kind of like the very lower end of young adult. At the same time, the characters themselves are like 17, 18, and when I was like reading it, I was like, oh, I do not remember the romance. Like there's no spice, but like they're hardcore making out sometimes, you know? So I'm like, oh, maybe this is not juvenile. So like for like writing wise, prose wise, I think it's really good for like juvenile 11 and 12 teens, but it's not as good if you consider it part of like the YA genre. So like I'm still kind of confused on where it's at. I definitely don't think it can be classified as adults because it is for kids. And I do think that's another conversation to have at another time. But I do think adults who read YA series and juvenile series, like middle grade, I should not call it juvenile, middle grade series, like middle grade, if you're an adult reading middle grade and YA series, and then you just like hate all of them, my question is, why are you still reading them? Because I saw reviews for the series of like so boring, like all full grown women. Like of course it's boring for you, you're not the target audience. Why do you keep like, adults definitely should read YAs, and I'm an adult and I adore YAs, but if I'm reading a middle grade and I hate it, like I admit that I probably would have liked it a lot more if I wasn't older, you know? But I feel like a lot of people don't like think about that. Anyways, now that I'm older and I'm actually the ages of these characters, I actually understand them a lot more. And so yes, he was kind of annoying, and like I wish he wasn't there because he was causing so many problems. But at the same time, he was crucial to America's character growth. I just realized I didn't actually explain what's going on. So this is this dystopian vibe, right? So they're now a new and improved America, except they're not really new and improved because they have this weird system where each person is divided by castes based on like what they used to do. And now like, so basically if your grandparents were singers, you're in caste 5 and you're forced to be a singer. So like everyone in caste 5 has to be a singer, or I think like a dancer or like an artist basically. There's 8 castes. The last class, 8, they're homeless people, and then 7 is like basically one step from being homeless. 6, very working class. 5, like the artists. 4, I think, are like factories and farms. Caste 1 are the royal family, and the royal family, whenever there's a prince, they have basically a thing where kind of like pull out random girls from the country in like a raffle, but it's not really a raffle, but like in a raffle. And they all, I think it's like 30 girls, and they all go to the royal palace, and that's where the prince basically decides who's gonna be his future wife, and they like, it's like The Bachelors basically. So then obviously after finishing the selection, which I think is the weakest book of the series, I read The Elite, which I think is the best book. It did not suffer from second book syndrome. So yeah, this is definitely the best book. It has actually really interesting themes of oppression, tyranny, and classism, capitalism. So yeah, pretty good actually. I was thinking, like when I was reading it, I was like, well, if the target audience is like middle grade to younger young adults, I think she actually incorporated these themes really well for the audience, because like it's impactful, you know, and you can definitely draw connections to our current day and our current politics, and that was definitely scary to read about. But yeah, I definitely think the author did a good job with introducing these themes, or maybe more like reiterating these themes to its younger audience, because it's important for dystopian literature to, you know, show you themes that relate to current day. So yeah. Also, the characters are teens, like I mentioned, but they're not cringy. Like they actually go through dilemmas that I feel like a regular teen would go through. There's obviously the love triangle because America's entered into the bachelor thing, but she's still kind of like in love with her ex-boyfriend Aspen, but now she's also kind of like dating the prince guy. So there's that love triangle, but she goes about it obviously very confused, which I think is a very teen thing, and honestly like a very relatable and the human scale, because like anyone would be really confused in a love triangle. Like you're trying to like juggle two different guys. Like I understand it. And she creates like certain friendships. She had other girls are kind of like not it. Some girls are it, but like they're all kind of jealous of her because Maxon really likes her. So there's just like actual teen problems, and I think like they don't speak like dumb kids, because a lot of the times writers and authors genuinely write teenagers like if we are the dumbest group of people alive, which we're not. I will say this series genuinely has so much miscommunication in it that you will be like, and that's what makes the third book a 3.3 and not like a 3.5, because the miscommunication continues. Like in the second book, there's miscommunication. The third book, miscommunication, and then there's like a rebel attack. Miscommunication, rebel attack. Miscommunication, to the point where like 3 chapters before the end, there's a miscommunication that ends in like this catastrophic thing. It's all solved in the next chapter. And that's also another thing I didn't like. The ending, way too rushed. I did not like this ending. This, like, something happens to one person, and then it's like, it's written in like 2 lines and never spoken about again. And I was like, wait, there's no way. Genuinely, such a quick ending. I think that kind of ruined the last book. There's also the happily ever after type of ending, which is kind of like typical of a YA book. And that definitely leaves us with a lot of questions, which I do know she did like a spin-off series, but at the same time, this trilogy was supposed to end as a trilogy. So I think if the ending of a trilogy still leaves the readers with a lot of questions, you have a little bit of problems. So I basically just gave a 3.3 because the romance was really cute. And then the last book I read, The Bite and Her Nightmare, which I rated the lowest, 2.8 out of 5. This was an arc by the author B. Breyer. Here's the thing, I applied for this arc and I got it, and I was very grateful for it, but it's a novella, so it's very short, and it's inspired by The Nutcracker, which I thought was quite unique. And it's basically this girl who, really random, this whole book is set in Maine. It does not feel like Maine. It should be like Russia or like middle of Europe, like Eastern Europe, I think. Anyways, it's set in Maine. Now that I'm thinking about it, I definitely did not imagine the main character as an American. It just does not go with the vibe of the story. Nutcracker being American does not go with the vibe. Anyways, very random, but Nutcracker inspired, so this girl, the main character, Claire, she basically, her uncle dies and she is left in the will, his really creepy mansion cabin thing in the middle of the Maine woods. But in order to inherit it, she needs to live there for a month. Things start being really creepy, and at some point she even like dies and gets resurrected. It's really weird. And then there's a lot of like Nutcracker creepy things. So there's the rats, there's like being transported into other worlds, there's the uncle actually being kind of a creepy and having done like a bunch of things with his inventions. There's also magic in there. There's the Nutcracker coming to life, which was so annoying. He was such a misogynist. I hated the Nutcracker. And then there's like a thing in her brain, which is basically her nightmare, like from the title. So there's a nightmare in her brain who is just kind of like in love with her, but like it's so random because like why is he in love with her basically? And then she's in love with him back at some point, and you're like, when did this love story ever even happen? Like I was not present for this love story clearly, because this book is like 150 pages long and nothing is developed. Like the plot, okay, I kind of get it. The love story, okay, that makes no sense. And then the most annoying thing is that the main character, Claire, is basically, she lets herself get walked all over by men, obviously, since she lives in a very misogynistic, patriarchal society, which is probably like the 1800s, I think. So obviously she's like, lets herself get walked over by men, but also by her mom and her family. And so she's like, you know, and then throughout this book, it keeps mentioning how like now she's becoming so much stronger and she's like a powerful queen and she's a lady and she's not gonna let any man talk to her and whatever in that way. At the end of the book, I did not feel like that was her at all. Like the book kept reiterating, oh, she's so powerful and she's such, like, she's a changed woman. I do not feel like she was a changed woman. Like, as the reader, I was reading this and I was like, but you didn't change though. Like, the only thing that changed is that you now think that you're like that, but you're in denial, sweetie. You're not like that. This book kind of felt boring and too quick at the same time. I was just like, when is this gonna end? But also, I only have 2 hours left. Like, how the hell is she gonna, you know, finish everything up? I don't think it was well executed. I don't think it was well edited, but the prose was quite nice, and I did like the Nutcracker inspiration. I haven't read a lot of books with Nutcracker inspiration, so I think with more time and more resources, the author can definitely make a much better story, and I hope she does do that. I can't figure out if the date of the book was changed, because I thought it was coming out this year, January 31st of this year, but on Goodreads, it now says January 31st of 2026. So I'm confused. Maybe she saw some of the reviews because other reviewers said similar things, so maybe she's like reimagining the story. The problem is that at the end, in her afterwards, she mentioned how she was going to, she basically was kind of like open-ended. There were still questions because this book has the potential to be part of a series and potentially could have a sequel. The issue is that if there is no clear plans of a sequel, basically saying, oh, like, it's like that because it could have a sequel, it's just kind of a cop-out, because you just like have a lot of plot holes and you're saying, oh, but that's because there might be a sequel in the future so that like the readers are appeased. But no, it's just a book with a lot of plot holes. So yeah, I feel like I have more to say, but I don't. It's a really long video already. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know if you've read any of these books. Let me know if you are thinking of reading any of these books. And yeah, okay, bye.